Alrighty, so we're going to be talking about the first latch today. I am very excited to be talking about this mostly because I see a lot of even like lactation professionals and stuff doing this wrong. And I'll be telling some stories later about some things that I've experienced. So I'm really excited to be empowering doulas to get more information to help families through the first latch. I really think that the first latch is when we do a lot of establishing. You can always correct anything, but if we can start out the first latch strong, then we'll be a lot better. So my name is, my name is Abby Barnowski. I have been a doula for 6 years now, and I'm also a breastfeeding educator. And I'm nerdy about boobs, which is, weird to say. I always laughed when I was doing my training for breastfeeding when I had to draw pictures of breast anatomy for my class. I was like, this is kind of funny that now it's like my job to draw pictures of boobs, which is just weird. So if you guys would like, I would love it if you'd be open to introducing yourselves as well, so we can hear a little bit about you and what you're doing. So if you would like to do that, please go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself. You can also turn on your camera if you want to, whatever you feel comfortable with.
I don't mind going. So I'm Amber. It's terrible lighting. That's why my camera's off. But
that much better.
Yeah, it's so crazy. But I am a midwife to be, and I've been a doula for like a year now, I want to say. But I've been like working in birth and like all that for almost 3 years. So yeah, it's been a journey, but I've definitely wanted to like continue to learn because I want to move up to lactation consultant and stuff like that. So obviously just trying to further my education. Got to start somewhere. Yeah.
Absolutely. So. Well, welcome. I'm excited and congrats on all that you've got planned. Like I'm almost more excited when I hear like all people have ahead of them than all they have behind them, because like all those hopes and dreams is just amazing. So I'm excited to hear how.
Oh yeah, I'm super pumped.
So, 1 second. Yeah, so first of all, we're going to talk about a little bit of statistics. And this is like one of the big things that gets me super passionate about breastfeeding. Obviously, for me, I'm not a breast is best type of person. I'm an informed is best type of person. And I think a lot of times when families choose not to breastfeed, it's not necessarily because it's not a good fit for them. It's more so that they don't have the information about how beneficial it is, or they think it's going to be too hard, or they struggle and don't get that support they need to overcome a hard season of breastfeeding. Studies show us that really a lot of families that either don't breastfeed or do not complete their breastfeeding goals is mostly because of a lack of support, not necessarily a lack of desire. So 3 in 5 babies globally are not breastfed in the first hour of life. That statistic is kind of intense for me to think about because globally we're talking about third world through first world countries. There's a lot of places in the world. In fact, most of the places in the world, access to formula and bottles and nipples and everything is not readily accessible. So 3 in 5 is a pretty insane number. 820,000 babies could be saved every year if all children were optimally breastfed for at least 0 to 23 months. And only 41% of children under 6 months of age are exclusively breastfed. So not only do we have low numbers of people initiating breastfeeding, but also continuing breastfeeding for even 6 months, much less beyond. And the WHO has been increasing their recommendations and support of breastfeeding as long as possible. So we are going to work on helping make that better. So our main topics that we're going to be talking about today are holes in current breastfeeding support. And when I say holes in breastfeeding support, I'm talking about hospital birth, birth center birth, home birth, lactation support, all of that kind of whole system. We're also going to be talking about some easy and practical steps to support the first latch, and ways that we can set parents up to succeed in their breastfeeding goals. And again, I'm not going to say that everybody needs to breastfeed for 4 to 5 years, or that every single person should breastfeed at all. This is more empowering families to make a choice that they've already made, and empowering families to have all the information that they need so that they can make that choice, being informed and not just, well, I've just heard it's hard, so I don't want to, that type of thing. So I don't know if you guys can see the little box with our faces in it, but I'm going to move it out of the way because I can see it. Lactation consultants at hospitals are valuable servants. And I definitely don't want anybody listening to this now or later to think, oh, Abby hates lactation consultants and she hates one in hospitals even more. That's definitely not the case. I am so grateful for the work that they do. And when I talk about holes in the care that they provide, it's not necessarily saying that they're bad at what they do. It's just that there's very limited things that they can do because of their situation. And even independent lactation consultants, which I would consider to be the cream of the crop as far as lactation support goes, they can only help people who reach out to them and hire them. So it's like there's some disconnect in how thorough that support can be. Lactation consultants at hospitals oftentimes are very much lacking time to be with a patient. Usually you see them once, maybe twice for 15, 20 minutes during your hospital stay, which is within a 48-hour period. Also during that 48 hours, you're trying to get used to your newborn baby, you're trying to recover, you're having to sign forms and get all these things done in a very short window of time. You're sleep deprived, you're exhausted. And so even what little good information you're getting, you might not be retaining a lot of that information in that moment. So yeah, lactation consultants having limited time with families is difficult and not something that I don't know that we can resolve super easily, but ways that doulas can step in and kind of continue filling that gap that is left behind by that care. They also have very limited advice and information beyond checking baby's latch. Whether that's because of lack of knowledge, lack of experience, or lack of time, honestly could be a combination of all. A lot of times they look at baby's latch and say whether it's good or not, and then that's about it. And so families feel very not so much empowered to recognize a good latch further as it goes and as baby grows and changes and develops, as their breasts change sizes because they get more and everything. So they have a very limited amount of time that they have with that patient and limited ways that they can help continue on the good work that they've done in them to make sure it lasts. Hospital-based lactation consultants are also very much more likely to lean on pumping and nipple shields, which I actually just heard recently that nipple shields are getting a different name or something, like sheaths or something. So I don't know, so whatever it is, it as the device that you put over your nipple to help if you have inverted nipples or a lot of times I don't think they're necessarily being used for inverted nipples, but more being used for nipples that have not fully had their final shape after baby's mouth is given a lot of attention. So hospital-based lactation consultants are very comfortable with pumping and nipple shields. And so they're very eager to, prescribe those things to mamas. But there is also a lack of continuation. So like if a lactation consultant gives a mama a nipple shield, that mama then takes that home and then is not sure when or how to wean that off. So that's something that is also lacking in. So they have, they give these resources and these tools on how to use, but since they're not with them further down the road, they can't encourage them on how to wean off or increase when needed or decrease when needed, stuff like that. They also have limited or no knowledge about sizing flanges and sizing nipple shields, etc. I've heard this from multiple mamas and doulas who have experienced this, where they were asking their lactation consultant, which size flange should I use? And either they were being told the lactation consultant doesn't know, or they were telling them the wrong size. And then they found out later they could have been saving themselves a lot of time and energy and pain. So that's something that families are walking away sometimes with one hospital stay. They are given poor knowledge about their latch. They're given devices and tools to help them that they don't know how to continue on use past that 48-hour window. And then oftentimes they might be using them incorrectly. So that's a big challenge. And especially when you're a low-income family with limited resources after your hospital stay, it can be very challenging. So now, kind of more on the holes in doula support. I'm sorry, the holes in lactation support. I'm trying to find a way to move this window so I can read this thing and it's not really working. There we go. Now I figured it out. So we are definitely seeing bad advice coming from and I don't even want to just pick on lactation consultants here, because I've heard bad advice about breastfeeding come from pretty much every kind of birth professional out there. Everybody from nurses, lactation consultants, midwives, OBs, pediatrician. There is a lot of, and it's hard to understand exactly where all this confusion comes from. And since I'm not there with, those care providers to kind of see what their mindset is, all I know is that I have a mama come to me who tells me that her lactation consultant at the hospital said her boobs are too big to breastfeed. So good luck, or formula feed. And that's just very confusing for me. Like, I really wish that I'd been there in that moment to kind of unpack that a little bit. We see a lot of advice leaning towards early supplementation, even within just like the first 12 hours after baby is born, when it is super easy to provide colostrum for that baby. And the baby has no needs beyond colostrum at that point. So why are we offering donated milk or formula when, mom's producing enough colostrum to feed baby? And again, back to, we also see inaccurate nipple shield and flanges sizes, being told your milk might not come in. I've had a midwife tell a client of mine that, sorry, you had a C-section, you might just never get your milk. Was not great advice. Long story short, that mama did get her milk in. It was delayed because of swelling after her surgery, but she got it in and she's a powerful breastfeeder right now. And also we see not changing advice based on your birth story, and your postpartum circumstances. So whenever a lactation consultant is looking at a client, it is very possible that they will only look at what they are seeing. They might not take the person's social status, like how much support they have, how much wisdom do they have about breastfeeding, how much support do they have, what income is like, what's their income like, how desperate are they to breastfeed because they can't afford formula, things like that. And so doulas have this amazing thing where we can look at the whole picture from beginning to end. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. And, again, I want to reiterate just the lack of consistency in that follow-up. So these lactation consultants see them for a couple minutes and then that's it. And they never get to really hone their knowledge because they don't see those mamas 2 weeks later, 2 months later, 2 years later, to see how that advice impacted them. So, and as doulas, and you guys both are doulas, you probably have seen times where a care provider says something very offhandedly, like, oh, I'd be really shocked if you were still pregnant by the weekend, stuff like that. And then, that's all they see. They just say that statement, mom smiles and nods. 2 weeks later, they see them in labor. But we as the doulas see that stress, that like, oh, I didn't go into labor like my doctor said. What happened? Why am I still pregnant? I was so ready to go because he said this. And so because they just don't have that full picture view, it is very challenging for them to kind of like, how do we address this mama? And, not even just like the future information. They also don't have the past information. What was this mom's pregnancy like? Is this her first pregnancy? Has she breastfed before? Like just all sorts of information that the lactation consultant oftentimes won't get, but we as the doulas do have. And so we can kind of like, fill in all those gaps, whereas the lactation consultant just doesn't have that full picture like we do. And then I see a lack of guidance on when is normal for your milk to come in. I have had so many mamas, text me and be like, well, I started supplementing formula because 3 days postpartum and my milk still hasn't come in. It's like, oh, it's still completely normal for you to still have 2 more days before it comes in. Be grateful that you get 2 extra days without swollen boobs. So this is like information that is not being given to them by their care providers, whether that be a midwife or an OB or a nurse or whoever. And then there is the lack of setting up parents to succeed. So many times I see them going straight for bottle feeding before they just experiment with cup feeding or supplemental feeding devices. And then also have a lack of further resources and tools to give them for beyond their hospital stay. Okay, so this is what'll get you by here for now. Here's this Latch League group or whatever. They don't usually have that follow-up resources to help empower them to continue that breastfeeding journey. And unfortunately, a lot of times, and I can say I've been guilty of this too with taking care of my clients, it can feel a lot like ticking off a box, like healthy postpartum, check, like mom's not bleeding, check, or whatever. And so once we feel like we've met our check marks, sometimes it can be easy to kind of like, check out and not continue on to check on that mom and see how that's going. And truthfully, our healthcare system, the way it's set up now, is not designed to make sure that moms are okay. And that's something that all of us are working to change, and hopefully we will someday. So yeah, now that's the doom and gloom. Now let's talk about how awesome doulas are. And like, I'm definitely not one of those crazy people that like doulas are the be all end all. We are not. We are just one of a very big family of care providers out here that are helping families, and all of us working together, we will be able to do such amazing things. But focusing on what doulas are doing awesomely is, again, just seeing a client's journey from beginning to end. I say this all the time with labor and birth, you know, OBs, and even sometimes birth center and hospital midwives, they don't get into the habit of seeing a labor from beginning to end. So they come in at active labor, they check a little bit, they go back, and they come out, a little bit more active labor and go back, and oh, you're pushing now. And they have a very different view of labor compared to doulas, because we literally sit and watch this mama for hours and hours and hours as she goes through that labor. But in addition to, we also do that through their pregnancy. We're getting texts and calls, events about like, oh, this happened and I'm just feeling so discouraged, or I'm feeling empowered, whatever it is. We see all that, and then we see their labor. And then when it comes to that first latch, I want you to feel empowered and amazing, because you know all the things that led up to that moment, to holding that baby. And that's why some mamas really impact us more than others, because we see how much they struggled and how much they fought to get that moment. And then when it comes, it's like, oh, the most powerful, amazing thing. And so we know about the mom's nerves, the things that are making her unsure. And the nurse walks up knowing none of this, saying like, hey, this is what we need to do, not knowing anything that's going on in that mom's mind, but we know. And that's why I really like to see doulas empowering that first latch. Whenever I hear doulas saying they don't feel comfortable helping moms breastfeed, that makes me feel just a little sad, because I know that they would be so amazing to step into that role. And then beyond that, we also see them for a time postpartum and get to really see how that breastfeeding journey is going and get that follow up and get that feedback, whereas other care providers don't usually get that. We also, and you know, that's covered in the second point, pre-care and aftercare. We do all of that. And our goals exceed what a lactation consultant's goals are at times, especially hospital-based ones, because their goal is to get you doing what you need to do right now. And that's what's needed. We need that. But a doula's goal is like, okay, what's going to get you to where you need to for today, but also for every day that's coming after. And that can feel heavy and a lot, but I'm going to really break it down so it's really easy for you guys to empower them in that moment and not feel overwhelmed. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I know I'm like laying it out like a super complicated thing, but it's not. So we, sorry, I'm moving the thing again. One of the things I like to see doulas doing, but I hope, you know, this is something that every birth worker can eventually do, is set realistic expectations about when full milk comes in. This one is a huge one for me. I can't tell you how much misinformation I get about this one. I remember being pregnant with my daughter and being told by a nurse, oh, it's 3 days after my baby was born, and I had to switch to formula. I couldn't breastfeed anymore because my milk still hadn't come in. And she was a nurse, you know, like someone who should have well known better. And it's just crazy how much of lack of information there is on there. So full milk usually comes in 3 to 5 days, but can be even delayed after that. Now, we don't want to see baby only on colostrum after day 5 if we can avoid it. They really start needing that full milk after that. But there's tons of ways that you can do things to kind of like do what you need to do. I am still surprised how little information I see about supplemental feeding devices out there, to where you can have donated breast milk or formula connected to a bag with a tube running down to your nipple and still getting that stimulation, still getting that communication between you and your baby, and them also getting the milk that they need. So someday we'll get to see stuff like that more. Also, like, can we just talk about how colostrum is amazing? And a lot of times people downplay it. It's like, oh, that's not your real milk, but it'll come in eventually. And, you know, a lot of times your mamas are not going to be really clear on how awesome it is, but also not really clear on how it looks and feeling, you know, concerned about that. And that's something that we can do a lot of prep work with them leading up to that big day, and just like talking up colostrum, because it's amazing and it just so gets downplayed by a lot of birth professionals out there. And another thing is that a lot of times moms are very focused on how their breasts feel and how much they see being produced in pumping instead of looking at their baby for signs of low milk supply. So, it's like, oh, my milk came in and I know that, but my boobs aren't feeling engorged like everybody says, then I must not be producing enough. And then they start doing things and kind of, just going off a cliff instead of being like, wait a minute, is my baby acting normal? Are they showing signs of feeling full afterwards? Are they making enough poopy and wet diapers, stuff like that. So we can really encourage these mamas, especially in the 48 hours when they might be getting a lot of inconsistent advice. And actually, I hadn't thought about this. This just occurred to me just now, but not only is there inconsistent advice, but you see a different nurse, a different pediatrician, a different location. It's different people all throughout. And so there really isn't even any linear care within that 48 hours, which is insane now that I think about it. And then going into pumping to get that full milk to come in, or when that full milk comes in, if you're concerned about it not being enough, pumping produces less milk than direct breastfeeding. So if you pump and you get a certain amount of milk, guarantee that when you actually breastfeed your baby's getting a little bit more than that, and not copious amounts. Like if you pump 2 ounces, your baby's probably not getting 4 ounces, but it is some amount more. And so don't get discouraged, whenever you get that less milk. Babies also, their needs vary day to day based on what they're going, and especially at that early stage, their bodies are changing constantly, and what their needs are changing constantly. And so just encourage them to watch their baby and listen to their baby is going to really help them a lot as they go through this journey and feel some peace about it. So yeah. Now, when to latch. It's crazy, being a doula and working, home births, birth centers, and hospitals. It's so different everywhere. And based on every care provider, I see everybody do it different ways. And we really need a standard as far as like when's normal to latch. Now, I had a mama. I've actually been her doula twice. And her first birth that I was with her was her third birth. And after baby was born, I was very interested in the fact that she didn't want to hold baby right away. And in fact, it took her almost an hour before she wanted to touch baby. Midwife was very cool with it. I probably would have, even though I've become more comfortable with how that birth went down, I still probably would have encouraged mom to hold her baby a little bit sooner. But I will say that is exactly what she did both of the times that I was with her, where she just felt like she needed some space from the baby. But then once she brought the baby to her, everything was fine. Like she latched perfectly. She just really needed that moment to take a deep breath. So when do we latch? And again, I really like looking at baby. If baby's not feeling super interested in breastfeeding and it's still within that 1 to 2 hour window, then, be generous and be aware, be keeping an eye out, but also don't feel like you need to push to get that done. So listen to baby. We would ideally like to see that latch happen within the first hour. You don't want baby getting tired and groggy and then starting that journey out with, that lack of energy that sometimes they can get. But also prioritize checking in on mom. Make sure mom's had something to drink, make sure she's been able to take a deep breath after that baby's born and just kind of settle herself comfortably. And all that kind of stuff, because how she feels going into that breastfeeding journey is hugely paramount to how that journey goes. So be patient with her as long as it's within a reasonable amount of time. Like I said, within that 1 hour or less is ideal, but even an hour past that, just kind of keep an eye on her and keep encouraging her to do what she feels like she needs to do. And then make sure she can get at least semi-comfortable. If you have a mom laying flat on her back, it's just going to be really, really challenging. And she might feel exasperated and feel like she's not doing very well or something like that. So so adjust mom, check on mom, and keep an eye on baby. What I want you to consider avoiding is definitely avoid doing it for mom. And what this is taking mom's breast and sticking it in baby's mouth for her and saying, see, this is how you do it. I had a very negative experience with this. And so I'm fully, I'm allowing that I could be biased about this particular thing. With my first baby, I had read everything about breastfeeding. I was passionate about having a natural labor, but I was even more passionate about having a successful breastfeeding journey. So, my baby was born and I was ready. I was like, oh, this is going to be so awesome. And I didn't feel the need to breastfeed. She didn't look hungry. And so I was just holding her and soaking her in. And the nurse comes up to me and says, okay, so really need to start breastfeeding because we need you to deliver your placenta now. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And I didn't ask for help. I didn't say that, what do I do? I didn't do anything of that. I literally like looked at her, and then the nurse grabbed my boob, grabbed my baby, and literally just started shoving, trying to shove the nipple in her mouth. And I remember just laying there thinking like, whoa, this is not how I've read lots of blogs and watched lots of videos. I did not see it going down like this. And it didn't work. And then the nurse kind of like did her hands like that and said, she's just not ready yet, and walked away and didn't have any conversation with me. And I looked at her and I was like, well, I'm just going to try the stuff that I read about because it seemed legit to me. Let's see how it does. So I stroked her cheek. I rubbed my nipple up and down, and she popped her mouth open, stuck my boob in. She started breastfeeding, had a perfect latch from the beginning. And that was empowering to me. And I remember wondering like if that moment would have been the same if she had latched with this like aggressive, shoving the thing in her mouth. But as being a doula and kind of observing what I've seen in my clients, I really feel like the mamas who have had the midwives or the nurse, sticking, setting baby up to breastfeed and then be like, see, this is how you do it. So yeah, do that next time. Those are the mamas that have a lot of, I'm just not sure, am I doing it right? Blah, blah, blah. Like, so I like to avoid doing it for them because I think that building their confidence in that moment of like, look what I did is really important. And even if it takes us a few extra minutes of her trying and adjusting, we can always revert back to doing it for her later after we've given her a good amount of time to really give it a good go first. And then really avoiding rushing mom. It's like, it's a brand new process for her, brand new process for baby. And depending on all the things that might be going on in the room, we can just be patient and just keep trying. Even if baby is just rooting at the nipple, that is still nipple stipulation. So that's going to be doing stuff for delivering the placenta. So that's great. So just encourage her that nothing is a failure. Baby opened their mouth. That's good. Oh, you got the nipple in this time, but the baby's mouth wasn't open. Let's just keep trying back and forth until she figures it out on her own. That has been one of the best things for me in seeing my mom is empowered is when I stopped doing hands-on care like I'd seen so many do and just started talking and encouraging and, pointing and adjusting, but mostly letting her do it on her own. And release the expectation that the first latch is going to be perfect. Sometimes it is, and that's great. But also in viewing that the first latch doesn't have to be perfect, also remember that an incorrect latch is still a trial and a practice. And so it's not a failure. It's a whoops, now we know what's wrong. Oh, you felt that pinching. Yeah, that's when the nipple's in there short. Let's see if we can get it a little bit deeper. It's all a learning process. And we learn everything else by trial and error. So why not breastfeeding too? So that was what not to do. Now let's do what to do. Lean into baby and mom's cues. If mom is still looking very hectic and frantic and stressed, that's not the time to be like, are you ready to latch your baby now? No. Say, let them calm and settle themselves. One of my favorite things that I talk about with my clients is that they did this study where they were looking at how much nutrition we get from the food that we eat based on our emotional state at the time. So they had women from New Zealand and women from Thailand switch meals. So they were nutritionally identical meals, but the food style was completely different. And they had them eat the food and found that they absorbed less of the nutrients than they did when they ate the food from their own country. And then they took the study further and they had the food, they ran it through a blender and gave them the food from their own country, but this time it's a weird milkshake. I've never had Norwegian food, but picturing Thai food in a blender, drinking it, ugh. And both groups absorb less nutrients from the food. So they realized that how you feel when you're eating can impact how much nutrients you get. So you can be eating that perfect, spinach, salad, whatever is the most healthy thing for you. But if you're stressed and like walking around your house cleaning while you're doing it, you're probably getting less nutrition from it than if you would sit down and actually enjoy it. So this has to be somewhat true for breastfeeding too. And I know that we see that stress can reduce milk supply. So it makes sense to me. So we really want mom coming into that moment at peace and ready whenever possible. And especially if we still have plenty of time, there's no need to rush. Also, help prop her up. Now, this is actually the picture that I have in the middle there is actually not the best picture. I was trying to get a picture of her pillows, but now when you see the full version, it looks more like her elbows are supported, but now I'm seeing it looks really like she's kind of slumping into that, but she's not, she's supported, I swear. And pillows, especially at hospitals, are those pillows that start out like huge and then they squish down to pancakes. What I really like to do is to roll up a blanket or a towel to put under their elbows. It feels very secure and very firm. I also encourage all of my mamas to bring a nursing pillow to the hospital. I know that some doulas don't, but for me, I'm like, you know, you can really prop yourself up, even just like at that, when you're laying on your back, it's just at least holding the baby up closer to you can be helpful. So help mom sit up as much as she can based on what's going on. If she's getting repaired or anything like that, obviously she needs to be a little bit lower, but there are other things you can do to help support her arms and her shoulders and stuff. And I just want to reiterate, be patient, let the mom do what she needs to do to get to that first latch. So, whoops, I forgot someone doing that. Sorry, guys. Now, in kind of like talking a little bit more on empowering mamas in beyond that first latch, really go over true signs of low milk supply with them. Watch their baby, watch their baby's demeanor. Just keep a general eye on poopy and wet diapers if you see that going down, or if you see baby's weight going down. Weight should be on the list. I forgot to put it there. Empower them on how to boost their supply. Boosting supply takes time. Don't have them expect like, oh, if I drink this mother's milk tea, then by the evening I'll have engorged breasts. That's not really how it goes. It takes time, especially when you consider that your breast milk is made from your body's blood, and so it takes time to boost your blood and make it more healthy. So and really stress on demand feeding. I know that, you know, it can feel stressful on a mom to feel like she's constantly at the whim of a tiny baby, but especially in those first 2 weeks, you want baby nursing as much as they want to with no limitations. That helps build that supply. And I feel like a lot of times moms struggle with supply later probably could have been solved if they respected that feeding on demand for the first 2, even 4 weeks, you know, a little bit more closely. Boosting supply does not have to require medication. And in fact, I've not had anybody who's even had to go to medication route. We've always been able to manage it, mostly with brewer's yeast or oats. Both of those have been honestly the saints for me with dealing with my clients and with dealing with my own supply too. There was one time I had a slightly lower supply and I just did a bowl of steel cut oats, and by the evening I was like full. So that one was quick, but I think that I was honestly I was only like a smidgen low. I wasn't like super low. So main points to remember: patience, let mom lead the breastfeeding experience, follow baby's cues, and follow up afterward and see how everything is going. So I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your comments. This was kind of fun building this talk, unsure of like what some doulas know and what some doulas don't know. I wanted to lean on the side of thoroughness. So if it felt like a lot, no worries. I'm going to be sending the slides from this to you, to your email. And also I'm going to be sending a couple of handouts for you that are freebies that you can use. I'm really excited for you guys to see them and give me some feedback on them because I'm really proud of them. So if you have any questions, go ahead and pop in. I guess you can raise your hand. I think Zoom does hand raising, right? It's been a while since I've raised my hand on Zoom. So I don't know how to do it, but if you know how to do it, or just turn on your mic. Hi, Tracy. Yes. There you go.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I think something that we discussed briefly over email was, and you mentioned how important colostrum is. And having had my first child in London, that is something that is very different to here, the importance of colostrum. And a lot of all of the breastfeeding education stuff is provided free for expecting moms. Mm-hmm. So you can go to a workshop at the hospital or the birthing center where you will be having your baby, and they will do an hour-long preparation workshop with you. And one of the things that I found very interesting that I haven't come across here, as we spoke about in email, was colostrum harvesting.
I was actually hoping you were going to say that because if you wouldn't mind talking about that tiny bit, I would love for you to unpack that a little bit for me and Amber, because I do want to talk more about that.
Sure. So I went to, because over and above wanting to have a natural birth. And in London, that's your only option unless you have a medical complication. I was determined to breastfeed. I dreamt about it. I had nightmares about it. It was the one thing that I prepared most for. So I went to the workshop, and at the end of the workshop, she handed out these 1 milliliter syringes. And she said to us, if everything's good from 36 weeks, just a milliliter a day, hand express some colostrum, collect it either in a spoon or directly into the syringe and freeze it. And on the day that you're going to labor, take that with you to the hospital. And I didn't think much of it. I did it because, she told me to. And honestly, that little act, that little practice that I did saved my breastfeeding journey, because my birth, although natural, was rather traumatic. And I needed to get stitched up and I wasn't able to have my baby with me. He was on my chest for about, half an hour before they needed to do the medical procedure. And then I was so out of it, I couldn't breastfeed him. I couldn't get him to latch. So my frozen colostrum that I had taken with it obviously thawed over the time that I was there. And my husband was able to feed him, colostrum rather than them getting formula or donor milk or anything like that. I had just taken it with me. And then, as you were saying, not being forced to do it, I had a health worker come in who obviously hadn't read that we had fed the baby colostrum. And she did the whole boob grabbing, shove nipple in mouth. Baby wanted nothing to do with it because he was full, obviously. Right. And they sent me on my merry way. I went home the same day, and having left the hospital, I hadn't latched. But I found that when I got home and everything was a bit more peaceful and was just me and my baby bonding, I didn't have a problem with latching and getting everything done. But that colostrum harvesting was so important. And I've spoken to so many friends about it before. I had a friend recently who because I'm busy doing my lactation counseling course. And I did a breastfeeding education thing with her because she was quite determined to do it too. And her birth went as most births in South Africa do. And she ended up with C-section. And her baby was in the nursery for 2 days before she could hold the baby because of all the drugs that she had received for pain. And her OB actually told her that colostrum harvesting is a waste of time and she shouldn't do it. So when she was in the nursery for 2 days, they shoved bottles of formula down her throat without pace feeding. So when it came to her trying to breastfeed, her baby was having none of it, absolutely none of it. And her breastfeeding journey ended before she even had a chance. And when I saw her recently, she was like, she wishes she had just done colostrum harvesting because she would have had enough of a stash for them to be able to feed her baby over the 2 days with a syringe or a cup rather than, non-paced bottle feeding. So it's something that I talk to a lot of moms about, just in passing and things like that. And I find that a lot of the medical professionals say that it's a waste of time. It's not necessary. You don't need it. And I just find that it's actually it's a little gem that if you can do it and there's no complications, it's not going to send you into early labor because you're getting 1 ml out. So you're spending all of 5 minutes pumping out a few drops of colostrum, but it saved my breastfeeding journey. So it's something that I want to spread more of the word about,
Yes. And actually inspired by our email conversation, I listened to a podcast called the Milk Minute Podcast. And I found an episode on there where they were talking about harvesting colostrum. And so I listened to it and was just like, really just kind of lit up. Because it's easy for a care provider who doesn't care if you formula feed or not, to say it's a waste of time. What difference does it make to him or her? But yeah, it couldn't, basically it's one of those things where is it possible it would hurt? As long as you're doing it safely. And like you said, it's only a few minutes a day. And you don't even have, you do it as much as you want to, you don't have to do it, the recommended amount, you can do it less, it's not going to hurt anything. And so if it gives you some peace about, your breastfeeding journey, and if it gives you actually some colostrum to give your baby, that's even better. Because the crazy thing for me is that formula is not, they don't make a formula version of colostrum. The formula that they give babies is the full milk version. And that's what the babies need in those first 3 to 5 days. And so if we happen to have some of that around, how sad are we going to be exactly?
And I think what's more upsetting is like, because you were saying as well, we see, and I'm not a birth doula, but I've walked with women through their birth journey, friends, family members, that type of thing. Been at birth myself. We see from day one what women go through, right?
Yeah.
The OBs or whoever is delivering the baby kind of pops in and doing active labor, and then they're like, hey, yes, your baby, whatever happens after here, we don't particularly care. Your baby's fine, all good. And I think what gets me, and I'm not sure if you've found this in your professional life, is that the advice that we give tends to not be taken as seriously as those that have the medical degree behind them. Because when I said to her, did you harvest your colostrum? She's like, no, my OB says it's a waste of time. I was like, okay, but lactation is what I do. It's like, that is my only focus, lactation and postpart. That is literally what I do. And then afterwards, we had a conversation with her, obviously after she, worked through the trauma of how her birth went. And she was like, if she had just done that, it would have saved a whole bunch of pain and sadness on her side. And I mean, lactation counselors, I helped her. We got a whole bunch of lactation counselors in because she lives in South Africa or consultants, sorry, to try and help. And there was nothing wrong. There was no lip tie. There was no tongue tie. There was no inverted nipples. There was the milk was in. It was all there. It's just the baby would not latch. And what ended up happening was lots of tears, lots of frustration, and her just not being able to continue. She physically did not want to, because every time she had to feed, her anxiety went through the roof.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just feel that if, like you said, education and support, I'm not formula or breast milk is best or fed is best. I'm information and knowledge is best.
Yeah.
And having this stuff in your arsenal of being able to make your breastfeeding journey a success, it's important to me. So that's why I'm here to listen to what you had to say, because I agree with everything.
Well, I figured, because we're very kindred spirits, and I love that. I agree completely. And it's hard as a doula, I think any birth worker that doesn't have a medical degree, because like we want to keep our mamas safe, we want to keep our families safe. And so what I always say is like, well, when it's medical advice, I would say, well, check with your care provider first. Here's my recommendations, etc. And then it's so challenging when you give that and then they go and check with the care provider and the care provider tells them the opposite or disregards what you said entirely. And it's like, I'm not trying to give you medical advice. I'm just trying to give you the information you need. And this is not a medical thing technically. Like technically I would have to say, like, check with your care provider before you do colostrum harvesting.
Absolutely.
Because there could be risk factors that could put them in early labor and stuff like that. But then if they get told by that care provider, it's a waste of time. It's so challenging. And it sometimes feels like just pushing on a wall, slowly trying to make the world a better and safer place for mamas, while also walking that line. But it's so challenging. And like I said earlier, like the mama who was told by her midwives that she probably would never be able to breastfeed, she had to go through 3 lactation consultants before the third one was like, are you having swelling from your C-section? And she was like, yeah, I am. She's like, oh, well, that's what it is. Take care of the swelling and your milk will just boost right up, because your body can only make so many fluids. And it's like,
right.
we got to go to the fluids. So so once she fixed that, she's like, I have extra milk. I got milk in the freezer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's crazy to me that a midwife who is obviously very like a birth center midwife is passionate about natural childbirth and breastfeeding, all that stuff. Like you don't get into that line of work unless you do. And yet and this was in the middle of the peak of the formula shortage. And I was like, why? Why are we like telling this woman she can't do this? Like, so I was really grateful that she did not listen to her care provider, which I hate to even say that out loud and then record it and put it on the internet. But but I'm really glad that she listened to her gut and just did what she needed to do. So
yeah, I think it's also hard when moms get told when they're struggling with breastfeeding and they get told what they want to hear, if I can put that in inverted commas, like you aren't able to breastfeed. Your breasts are the wrong shape to breastfeed. And in reality, the only 2% of all breastfeeding women in the world, or all women in the world, have a physical reason why they cannot breastfeed, because their breasts have insufficient tissue or the list is long, but that is a very, very small percentage of the amount of people in the world that are able to breastfeed.
Yeah.
But when you're struggling and you go and you find someone that says, oh, well, your breasts are the wrong shape, so you're never going to be able to breastfeed. That's it. You know, I with my first, my milk took 6 days to come in. Okay, it came in full force when it did, but I was also being told by whoever had a comment to give,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're just not ever going to be able to breastfeed because you don't have milk. And my cousin said that to me multiple times. She's like, I tried to breastfeed for 4 days, no milk, wasn't able to. I was like, 4 days is nothing, you know, in the greater scheme of things. But again, this is all stuff that I ended up researching and looking for and trying to find out why and what was going on.
Yeah.
But it would have been easier for me to go, I don't have milk. So it's one of those things.
We've been kind of, I've been kind of hard on care providers, I feel like, through this. And I definitely don't, you know, there's some amazing ones out there, but also we need to kind of have a come to Jesus moment with ourselves as mamas. You know, a lot of times we bring so much of our own journey when we're talking with that other mama and encouraging her or discouraging her. And, you know, I see a lot of times moms being like, oh, I had a C-section, I couldn't breastfeed. So, you know, you probably won't be able to either, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, why are we doing that? Why are we approaching the conversation instead of saying like, what do you want to do? Like, what's your goal? And then be like, how can I empower that? I'll never forget seeing, in fact, I think it was a commercial for Zoom actually, or some FaceTime or some video communication thing where this mama was trying to breastfeed and she was feeling exasperated and just like completely stressed out. And she video called with her mom, and her mom was like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like that happened to me too. Here's something you can do. And she's like supporting her. And I saw in the comments, because you know me, I'm a birth worker. I saw that and I was like, first of all, this is an amazing commercial. Second of all, I'm going to look for the comments because somebody is going to be
somebody's going to say something.
And sure enough, somebody comments like, this mama looks like she's in so much pain and so stressed out. Like, why doesn't somebody just give her a bottle? And I commented, I said, you know what this looks like? This looks like a woman who has a goal and she had someone support her in that goal. Like, forget how hard it is. Human beings are strong. We can do like some amazingly challenging things. And
absolutely,
we got some goals that we want to meet. So yeah.
The thing is, I think if you're equipped moms with proper information, with options, with choices, and I think I've spoken to you before about the massive range of normal. What is normal?
Yeah.
Telling me that you have to have X, Y, and Z happening at day 3, you know, it's like poopy diapers. I was an absolute mess because my son pooped the first day multiple times and then didn't poop again for 11 days. And I was an absolute emotional mess because everyone's telling me that, you know, it's not enough milk, it's not this, it's not that. But when you read up about it, the range of normal, yes, it's maybe extreme, fair, but breastfed babies generally don't poop as much as formula-fed babies. But nobody told me that. Everyone's just telling me you're starving your kid. I was like, okay.
He's like happy as a clam. And they're like, look at him, he's suffering.
Right. He's gaining weight. He's sleeping. He's peeing all the time. He just didn't poop. And it was just like this long, you know, phoning backwards and forwards and trying to figure out what was wrong with my kid when actually nothing was wrong. But I just needed to understand that still falls within the range of normal. And having that information, and like you were saying, approaching these challenges that moms have more holistically with information that they can then decide what they want to do from there, rather than to be told colostrum harvesting is a waste of time. You know, explain that this is, and if they go, actually, I don't have time to do that, it's not like, and that's then the decision that they're able to make. And I just, attacking, again, inverted commas, but approaching these kind of problems with information is just the way forward, I think. Just allowing moms to be able to know what's out there and make their own decisions.
Yeah. And if I could train any pedestrian anything, it would be to not assume because that's how it was for you, that's how it is for everybody. And just approach it like, let's find out. Let's learn about this, shall we? Like, but yeah, we have and shoot, I see it all the time. I'm pretty sure that my care provider was unable to have a natural birth because when she asked me what my pain management plan was, I told her, I was like, well, I'm reading my hypnobirthing book and I'm planning a natural birth. And like, I told her, I was like, I'm working on this, not just like, I want to see how it goes. And she told me, well, don't be a hero. And I was like, okay, someone who didn't meet a goal, maybe, I don't know, like, but like, just didn't even ask me like, what are your goals? Why do you want to do this? So, and you see it all the time. Like I was told the same thing when my daughter was lip tied, and she was lip tied and tongue tied. And my pediatrician refused to believe it because I wasn't having any pain while breastfeeding. And I was like, well, sir, she's projectile vomiting and she will only sleep 20 minutes at a time. And she wakes up vomiting, like not spitting up, vomiting. And he still wouldn't believe that there was something wrong with her. And so I assumed, I was like, well, it must be something in my milk. So I was like, I'm going to go on an elimination diet and find out what she's allergic to then. Because if it's not a tongue tie, it's something. And he said, well, don't punish yourself. And I'm like, that's not why I'm doing this. Like,
Yeah, no, this is not
my
for
daughter's in
self-torture.
pain.
This is to help my baby.
But not, is this something you want to do? Like he could have easily brought because he could have, there's a possibility I could have had some shame about failing at breastfeeding. He could have easily said, well, tell me about your goals. Like, why do you want to breastfeed? You know, do you want to consider formula? Like, talk to me, instead of being like assuming what my motivations are.
Right. And
And,
here are some resources to help you. Here is some stuff that you can read up on. This is someone you can reach out to. And then you as a mom, depending on your determination, can then take forward and go, you know, like you said, you were absolutely determined to breastfeed. And I find that if you've got that mindset, nothing stands in your way. Like you will, I have an acquaintance that was the same. She was determined and she did everything to be able to feed her child. And I'm talking about all the supplements, all the water, all the everything. And, you know, she was determined and she got it right. It was not easy.
Yeah.
It was not easy for her, but she did it. So I think once you've got that mindset, that's just, you know.
That's true. So true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Amber, how are you doing? Like, I don't feel like excluding you.
I was just about to say, I think I've spoken enough now. I'm going to go back on mute.
No, y'all are fine. You're totally good. That was so interesting. I was just sitting here like, wow, that's crazy. All of that. Um, no, it was cool. I guess one of the only like questions I have
Mhm.
would be like I had a first time mom do a hospital birth. I want to say like the beginning of July, maybe. And she looked at me and she had no idea what was going on. I mean, she was typical, you know, like epidural, like she did all that stuff. She tried to go into it naturally, but had
Yeah.
prodromal labor for 4 days. And so she was like, once they had to do the pit and everything, she was like, Amber, I'm done. I can't do it. And I was like, it's okay. Like you can, but I
Right.
understand, you know, pit is not normal. So anyways, and so once she had baby and everything, she had suffered a significant amount of blood loss, and I kind of kept paying attention to her face because I had a super traumatic experience with the same kind of issue for my first hospital birth. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, no, like that last one ended up really bad for a minute, you know, and I was like, okay, this can't happen again. So
Yeah.
I was kind of paying attention to her color, to baby's color. His color wasn't like fantastic, you know, I would call it like white, and that's not a color we like to see, if that makes sense. It was like a pinkish white, and I'm like, okay, hold on a second.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that baby's not getting enough blood, you know, like there's something. They didn't do delayed cord clamping, like they didn't do any of that, and I was really frustrated. That's my one thing with hospital births is they don't really listen to what you want. So I tried to get baby on breast as like fast as I could without her like passing out on me, you know, type of thing.
Yeah.
And she would just keep looking at me and she's like, I don't know what to do. Just tell me exactly what to do. Can you help me? I don't know how to do it. It was her first baby.
Bless her.
And so, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like that's not the best thing to go through your first time. But
Right.
in that instance, she was so weak that she could barely hold baby, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, I didn't completely want to say do the whole like boob shoving in the mouth thing. I'm not like aggressive, but I did have to help because, you know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it was super almost like impossible for her to do both things while losing all that blood and whatever, being really weak.
Yeah.
And so, but the nurse looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, do you not agree with how I'm telling her to breastfeed her baby? Like, I work with a lactation consultant and
Yeah.
stuff, and I've been trained in it and everything, and like how to kind of help with the first latch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just did everything, and baby like literally got on that boob so fast. I mean, nothing that I did was wrong, and nothing that the mom did was wrong. I
Yeah.
just couldn't stand the way that the nurse looked at me. So
Yeah.
I guess like my question would be like, in y'all's opinion, do you think that like that was a good call to like help, even though it was a little bit more hands-on because it had to be, or would y'all have like let her still do it on her own anyways?
Yeah, like and thank you. Like I really do think the caveat to everything that was said throughout this whole thing is that, you know, this is always easier to follow when it's normal and when things are going fantastic. And there are going to be
Right.
some times, and like I said earlier, you know, like, you know, having that just kind of like if we need to get to the point where urgency, you know, mom's well-being or babe's well-being comes and we need to like do what we need to do, then yeah, be hands-on as long as, especially when mom's saying like, you know, and like epidural, she probably was laying relatively flat on her back and they were dealing with the bleeding. There's a lot going on and she still had Pitocin running through her system. She felt groggy, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that that was honestly a very, very good kind of like being like, okay, we're past the point of just like having a blissful postpartum, unfortunately for this mama. This
Right.
golden hour is being taken away a little bit. We're just gonna have to do what we need to do. And yeah, and as long as like you're kind of, you know, keep continually checking in with mom and seeing how she's doing, like, you know, is she still looking comfortable with this process, like then keep going. I think if whenever you have to do that, I would say just do a tiny bit more follow-up care, being like, you know, maybe after mom's settled in, I don't know how long you stay with that mama or how long you typically stay, it's different for every doula, and I think that's a very personal decision. But if you do subsequent latches, then just be really like, you know, observant and seeing how she's doing, see how confident she's feeling in that, can go a long way to kind of like work from that. So yeah, I think you did the right thing. And I'd be interested in your Tracy's thoughts too, if she wants to offer them. But yeah, it sounds really, you did a really good job.
As as someone who's not a birth doula, I'm a postpartum doula. That's where my passion lies. I applaud you for doing that, because I think the whole reason we hire doulas, especially in a hospital setting, is that somebody is there to advocate for us. Because unfortunately, you do just become patient 127 in room 104, who's just
Right.
had a baby A weighing in at 8 pounds and 21 inches or whatever. And it just becomes, you just become a number to the medical staff. And it is sad. And I'm, again, not bashing medical staff. That's not what I'm doing, but that's the reality of it. So I think that what you did is exactly what you were hired to do. You were there to advocate for mom and for baby and that diet and looking after them. So I don't think you overstepped a boundary at all. If baby took to the breast immediately and mom was able to, you know, we were able to save a possibly very dire situation. No, well done. I think that's awesome. I've never had a baby in a hospital. I've only had babies with midwives. So I've never had a birth doula, because I feel that obviously midwives are, as Abby said, passionate about that golden hour, delayed clamping, all of that good stuff, you know. But if I ever found myself in a hospital situation, I would definitely want a doula there to be able to speak for me when I wasn't able to. And it sounds like this mom wasn't able to and wasn't really sure what she needed in that moment. So yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes me feel better. Yeah, no, it all went good, you know, and then like after everything was said and done, you know, I mean, she took to breastfeeding immediately and everything's been fine. She still is breastfeeding, you know, baby pinked up super fast after she had, you know, officially got him to latch and everything. Like everything just went really good. I typically work in a birth center setting. That couple kind of like fell in my lap. And so, you know, like I literally am like, I'm a secretary at a birth center. I'm trying to train to be a midwife. You know, I work as a doula for the birth center. And so I'm used to natural births, you know, like not all the medications. I'm used to, you know, to the golden hour, to delayed cord clamping, to all of those things. And so it was almost like a little anxiety trigger for me. It was like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is like not supposed to happen this way. And it's so uniform,
Right.
that it was, I don't want to say frustrating, but it kind of was a little frustrating just because it's like, oh, this could have went such a different way. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well,
But yeah, she did great.
and I want to say to you, Amber, too, how excited I am that you are going to be a home birth midwife. I'm assuming that's planned. Is that right? You're planning on being a home birth or a birth center midwife, I mean.
Both birth center and home. Yeah, like the center I work at do both. So yeah, that's
So what I love about you walking through this family is like, I hope that you get a few more hospital-based families before you switch on to full midwife mode. It is surprising to me how many midwives are completely shocked about some of the stories I've told them. of clients that I've had in hospitals. Like a lot of them don't realize exactly how toxic that environment can be. And I had midwives who were just like, oh yeah, our number one transfer recommendation is such and such hospital. And they told me that. And I was like, that's like, and it's a medical city hospital, which if anybody's medical history, I was just like, really, that's your number one recommendation? And I was just like, I was trying to process this. And I was like, maybe this medical city hospital is different than all the other ones I've been to, but okay, we'll see. And then I got there and it was completely nothing like, I'm sure that they have no idea what it's like. I'm convinced of it because there's no way they'd recommend it. And I'm like, if the problem is that they don't go with the clients to those births. It is, yeah, so they just don't know. So I'm excited that you're going to be that midwife who knows what it's like. And so when you like have clients who have to transfer, you're going to be able to sympathize with them in ways that some midwives just can't, because they just don't know what it's like. So good on you.
Yeah, it's been an experience for sure. And I'm just like, oh gosh, like I know obviously that God put them in my lap, because if he didn't, I would not have been there. I would not have done it, you know. Sometimes he just prepares us for those situations.
Yes.
You know, that was my second one. So we'll see. You know, I say that I'm open to doing them if I really feel led to. And you know, I know my boundaries when it comes to stuff like that, but you know, it's a definitely different than what I'm typically used to. But yeah, I mean,
I wish
it's great.
the same thing for OBs too. I think they would have a completely different view of birth if they would go to one birth center birth and just see what it's like.
Oh yeah.
And so, and I think I would bet that the amazing OBs out there, the ones that just like kill it, I'm pretty sure those are the ones that like their wives or they themselves delivered at home or at a birth center instead of a hospital. Like I think that's what makes them so awesome. Or they know someone who did, so they at least heard stories about it, you know, because
right, they're somewhat educated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
educate
absolutely. Yes.
And nurses too. Like whenever I have a nurse who tells me that she had a natural childbirth, I'm like, you're the nurse I want to hang out with all night. Like, you're the
right.
When she walks in and goes like, oh girl, I've had 3 of these epidurals. I'm like, okay, you probably can't help us with what we're doing here then.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a suppose you could call her a friend many years ago. Anyway, she gave birth in South Africa. I'm originally from South Africa, Amber. I talk a lot about it because there's a lot of stuff that happens in the birthing world in South Africa that is just not right. Like 95% C-section rate. It is awful. Anyway, and her OB told her that she couldn't have a natural birth because her legs were too short.
Oh yeah, I forgot you told me that story.
That is the most bizarre.
And that's why she has to be induced and she has to have a baby at 39 weeks because her legs are too short. And I was like, and she wholeheartedly believed, well, oh, that's it. Sorry, there goes my dreams of having a natural birth because my medical doctor told me my legs are too short. And I was like, darling, it's got nothing to do with the length of your legs. There's nothing like your legs don't actually, you know, they just have to open. There's nothing else that your legs physically have to do.
Do you know what he was probably thinking though? Her legs are too short to reach the stirrups.
Right.
Probably,
yeah.
Something. I don't know. Actually, she was due around a public holiday, so it was a long weekend. And he didn't, I assume, didn't want to take the chance that he had to come in on his day off. But anyway, some of the excuses for why people can't, and like you were saying, if you find an OB that is all for natural birth, it's generally because they've been around one or have had one themselves, or their mothers were midwives or something. So anyway, I thought that would be it's a interesting reason to not have natural childbirth.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a brand new one. We're gonna have to start like making memes of like dumb things that OBs have said to women.
Oh gosh, I have a whole long list. All of my friends in South Africa has had C-sections, all because of reasons like your legs are too short.
Jeez, I hate it so much. It's gonna take a lot of work for us to fix this planet, but we're doing our best.
I know, right?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Any last minute thoughts? I don't want to keep y'all. You guys have been so gracious, giving me so much of your time this evening. I'm so grateful. And I'm, like I said, I'm really excited about the handout that I'm going to be giving you guys, and I want your feedback on it because it's brand new, and so I need advice on how to make it better. So you let me know. But I'm excited
to see it.
Questions?
Yeah, I'm excited to see them.
Yeah.
I'm gonna I probably need to email them in the morning, but I might get so excited and email them tonight. But you'll get them before the weekend, hopefully, unless I'm at a birth. You know how that goes.
Yes, we know that life. Oh my gosh.
All right, ladies, you guys have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Abby. I appreciate it. Amber, was nice to kind of meet you.
Yes, you too.
And yeah, we'll be in contact. Have a good night.
Absolutely.
Yes, y'all too.
Yes, thank you. You guys have a great time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.